So, question number one: why did you become a FNaFb?
To start off with, one of my hyperfixations is Five Nights at Freddy's, and another one is Japanese RPGs, specifically for ones like Final Fantasy and Persona. And so, obviously, when I heard there was a mix of the two, I jumped at the bit to do it. And then one day, I was looking to get into the debug room of Final Mix 2, and so I put up a post looking to trade RPG Maker VX Space for my spare copy of Don't Starve Together. I eventually got it through some divine miracle, and after a while, I had the idea of making them, because I played SL. I thought it was dog shit, and so I wanted to try and do the concept better. And then several years later, look where we are.
Whoa. Alright, that makes sense. Do you have any advice for newbie devs?
Well, I'd say that the most important thing for gameplay in specifics is to focus on trying to make each skill have a unique purpose. Like, you don't want to have a skill that's like, oh, this skill hits X amount of times, and this skill hits a bit more harder than usual. Like, usually the skill of multiple hits just wins out every time. And so you want to try to mitigate that as much as possible, at least in the same character. And when you're making characters, you want to make sure you have this clear idea of what you want them to do. Characters like Boy Bonnie, I've always criticized because it does look like both Sable and Zane just kind of slap shit on him and hopes it would work. And while he may have a good skill for a situation like facial recon for guaranteed defense debuffs and spread bomb for grinding, there isn't really much purpose to him, which is why I had trouble with making skills for his Phantom version and Golden Reversal. So yeah, I'd say it's much better to have a clear idea of what you want this character to be doing, what role you want him to do, and to limit the amount of things in a specific category so that you don't have a bunch of overlap, in order to keep the combat from becoming so expansive that almost no place really feels all that impactful. There's also the point that if you want to make your gameplay interesting, you can have a much bigger focus on having all of your skills, equipment, and bullshit like that be focused on doing conditional or unique effects, like some of the passes in G. One of the passes in G and on reversal is Child Freddy's initial passive, where if he drops below 50% or kills someone, he gets a 25% attack boost. That kind of stuff opens up much more gameplay immersion, because you have choices and decisions and strategy that you had instead of the usual. Oh yeah, this thing is kind of does more damage, and this thing just makes you take less damage. Like it's good, but it doesn't engage in gameplay.
Alright, fair enough. What's your favorite game out of the trilogy, and why is it CC free?
You're wrong. It's FNaFb. That's because I really like FM3 Act 1 specifically because of all the games in the original trilogy. That's the game that I felt was the most in depth with all of its mechanics and skills and stuff like that. Because while Springtrap did have a bunch of overlapping skills, which is natural, like backup bash and connection, stuff like that, he did also have all these buff and debuff skills, which I found really fun to use in conjunction with his extra turn, which made his gameplay a lot more oriented towards using his actions to maintain these buffs and debuffs alongside trying to milk out damage from when he can, which made it a really engaging loop for me, even though I played it on critical mode where you basically are switched out of all your stats.
Alright, fair enough. Can you tell me about your work process when it comes to making games?
Well, first off, I start with outlining a bunch of basic ideas, like how many skills people are going to have, how many characters are going to be in there, stuff like that. And then I start to make character skills, because if you're going to make your game, you have to make sure all your characters are fun to use and are kind of worth it in comparison with each other, because otherwise your game is not going to be fun if half your characters are just meaningless bullshit.
Yeah.
So that is my first part of the process, and then I usually just wing the rest of it, because once you have a good foundation with your characters, then you can sort of just build off from there. Like if you have all your healing, all your buffs and debuffs set up, then you can very easily do your items and your weapons and armors and just work from there, basically.
Alright, I read good foundation. Now, moving on to golden reversal related questions. How did Bear Trap's design come into fruition?
Well, the basic idea was always just going Freddy but Springtrap. I'm gonna be honest. There wasn't much creativity in that neuron activation, but from there I was just kind of fucking with his model for a while, just adding random details like removing a part of one of his feet, removing his middle fingers. I had a gigantic tear in the middle of his torso, just to kind of mimic the withering that Springtrap has on his suit. And so he just became this good-looking, ruined model of Golden Freddy, which was the idea I was going for in the end.
Alright, fair enough. Speaking of Golden Freddy with Springtrap, why was Golden Reversal made?
Well, on the game page, it clearly states that the idea came from, hey, what if I just swap the two acts one day? And I thought it'd be funny, and it definitely was, but it ended up being a whole lot more in depth than anyone expects. And certainly a part of that is because I wanted to make a game where the summons really matter. Because in like Act 2, whatever fucking the yokai game is called, the most other games with summons, they just are kind of put to the side and ignored for the most part. I mean, you do have some niche scenarios, like I remember you were playing FAE and you used one of the Shao animatronics, you basically just fucking skip all the party hat progression.
Yeah.
Which I found funny, but still, it really was like most people just kind of just threw them aside, and because most of the time the summer was just either too strong or you had a normal party, and so it just wasn't worth it. Which I always thought was disrespectful to a point, and so I wanted to make this game where it was solely focused on making the summon gameplay actually good. And from the reviews I've done, it sounds like I did achieve in that goal to make Act 2, but not bug fixed. Also, my dogs are broken.
What was your so speaking of summons, what was your mentality for making the summons?
Okay, so in order to get to the idea of how I made the summons, we first have to talk about the summoner himself, Bear Trap. Basically, for Bear Trap, there's a couple of goals I had beforehand. One of them was to make him soft. There's no way around it. Without Chain, bro would be a fucking pushover in terms of if he was put into any other game, he would be utter dog shit. I mean, Trash Toss is fucking Golden Toss, except kind of worse.
True.
Slapdash Singer is kind of mid. There's only one use. He has nothing going for him. And that was the point. If I made him actually kind of good and strong, there would be no point in summoning anyone, because he would be strong enough to basically waffle stomp everybody on his own, which I wanted to avoid. And so the idea was to make him this support type character that he could do a little bit of everything, but you obviously needed summons in order to get any sort of actual progress done. You did a solo run of GR and it was fucking miserable. And so from that we can see how one led to another. For each of the summons, I had a specific goal in mind, at least for the first 7 of them. Well, technically 8, since I always wanted Phantoid Chica to be a healer, but for the rest of the fans, I really didn't know, to be honest. But for all the base summons and shadows, I had a very clear idea of what I want each of them to be. I wanted the Alpha Party Hat to obviously be the weakest out of all the summons, but had the unique idea that he would ignore everything, so even if you were trying to really push your limits with something like fighting a boss that you really weren't supposed to be fighting at that point, you could still technically do it because you could ignore all the bullshit the boss. The Bea Party Hat was always going to be focused on buffs and debuffs because I found it interesting. The Gamma one, I'm not sure if I found this was always going to be AoE because I just wanted one to be AoE on that boss. The Delta one was, I'm not sure it was always going to be Element and status based, but that's what I eventually ended up with because it fit within the rest of the dynamics within the group, and it's a lot better than where the fuck I was thinking of before. And then Omega Party Hats were the generic strong one, but I eventually found that to be really boring to work with. It also kind of go by two other characters, and so I had to change it to this weird hyper support character, which while a bit awkward considering their grand power in most fan games, I do think it works within the context of Golem Reversal. And then Shadow Frey was always supposed to be the powerful one, and Shadow Bunny was supposed to be the powerful buffer.
We love Shadow Freddy getting those W's. We love that in this house. But yeah, very insightful, Frash. Speaking of summons, and the last GR-related question, what's your favorite summon?
That's kind of a bit of a hard one because there's multiple aspects I like about different summons. If you want the one I put the most time into, it would have to be either Fem Puppet or Fem Point Bonnie, from whom I did an entire rework of both of them. If I had to pick a favorite one, it would probably have to be either Shadow Freddy or Omega Party Hat to use in a normal game, because I like the dynamic I had for Shadow Freddy where he could use toss-up runs, but due to the increasing costs, he also had to pair it with Shadow Wire to get this sort of infinite loop of getting SP instant in order to use his skills. While Omega Party Hat I found really funny the combo with everybody to get their buffs and shit up, to make them become very, very strong.
Right. Alright, now moving on to one debaucherous night of Flumpties. Just how do you come up with the plot?
Well, to be honest, the plot just sort of doesn't really exist. I just had the idea of taking what Flumpy did in Flumpy Night of One Night of Flumpy's 3 and making the plot about that, and just making a basic FNaFb game around it, because you have the camera shitting, you have the end goal of getting into this office, yada yada. The plot isn't really anything special. It was just, what if Flumpty just snapped one day?
Right. What inspired you to do that generator mechanic for it?
Can you say that again, please?
What inspired you to do that generator mechanic?
Well, obviously, the generator from One Night of Flumpy's 1. The full game was supposed to have three areas, with the final area being a reference to 1 week at Flumpty's, with the idea that you had a multiple floor dungeon that you had to scale up with different variations. That it was basically like the void floor from of Binding of Isaac, where it would be very chaotic and random. Meanwhile, the other 3 areas would be focused around the different One Night Flumpies games. Like, the first one was obviously the basement for One Night Flumpies 1, the second would be the living room for One Night Flumpies 2, and the third would be the freezer for One Night Flumpies 3, all having mechanics based around the areas around the games that are inspired in. So obviously 2 had the explosion mechanic, where the more time you took in between using your actions between turns, you would slowly gain exposure, and suddenly the enemies would get stronger and stronger as time went on. And obviously you could do actions to reduce it, but still. And then the freezer had the idea of basically what Up and Out Flumpit had with the freeze mechanic, where after a certain point you start taking damage and losing stats. And then I did also consider the idea of doing the opposite, where turning the heat up too high would also damage you, but I don't think I ever got around to adding that one. At least on the VXX build.
Mm-hmm. I see. What about Redman? He's kind of wacky in terms of gameplay.
Well, for one, all the characters in One Night Flumpty were trying to be a unique idea. I think the process was 2 characters per area. One was super unique and one was a bit more generic to even it out. So you had like the owl just being kind of there, and then fucking Eyesore being a character where you can't level up, you need to eat people to gain stats. It's bosses to gain weapon stats, shit like that. And obviously Redman was picked to be the odd one out for the basement. For his mechanic, I came up with the idea because I always thought that TP characters would work. Like the FM2 Bonnie and Toy Chica ones, where they had all TP skills and no SP skills. I always thought those could work, but only if you had the ability to regain that TP thing. And so I made the SP mechanic for Redman based around that, where basically he would have 2 skills that would either boost up his skills or give him a bunch of TP so he could use more skills. I sort of make this weird symbiosis between either using these certain skills to boost it up or to be more consistent with it. I still find the idea of Redman to be one of my better character concepts, even if looking back later on, the skills that were effective were kind of dogless, to be honest. Like, the burn skill is becoming fucking broken and other shit like that, but I still do like the initial concept of Redman a lot. And I think that when I eventually do get back to doing One of the Doctor's Nights of Clumpties in 2045, I think that he would be the one that would be the least changed from his iteration in the VXX build.
Alright, fair enough. Moving on to Up Mount Crumpet. How did the freezing mechanic come into fruition?
Well, first off, the basic idea of the game at that time was things that were cold, and so I made a mechanic that was based around being cold. I think I got some of the idea based off of the frozen gold creepypasta from the Hypnos FNaFb song. You know, the one with the Quill heating you up throughout the battle, and you get to how you just instantly die. Yeah, I just based it around the initial idea came from that one, and then I translated it into RPG Maker, which was kind of a bitch if I'm going to be honest, because the basic idea was that it'd be constantly rising up, and I had to finagle it a lot, get a plugin just to make it work at base instead of make it work within battles. And then obviously there was a lot of flunk associated with it. You barely tasted the game and you said you hated this. It was primarily because there was a lot of bullshit surrounding the mechanic about removing it and the consequences not really being defined well enough. Which, if I ever do get back to Mount Crumpet, which is a lot more up in the air than my other games, I do think I would have to basically redo the freezing mechanic, or at least the consequences of it, because while it is the most interesting part of the game, it's also objectively the worst, because you basically are just punished for thinking and shit like that. Meanwhile, there's also a couple of other problems too, like there was a selection for animation battle speed, and I think Kamek told me that there was, or told or showed me that there was basically no reason to not use the ×4 setting, and then other problems like that ensued. So yeah, it was just a whole ass thing that, while I think is mechanically impressive, I do think it really needs to go through a redesign process to really shine.
Fair enough. Why was Suicide Mouse added in?
Why was Suicide Mouse added in?
Yeah.
Okay. I added him in because I like the Suicide Mouse songs. That was the initial idea.
That's
other in-depth reason. Well, the main reason was the idea to add more. I wanted to add a bonus boss, and I thought Suicide Mouse would be an interesting one to add in. And so I added him in within like 2 days of the fucking jam ending. But yeah, there wasn't really like a grandiose idea there. I just wanted there to be sections of. I just wanted to be a bonus boss so you could fight in between the chapters. I mean, eventually there was going to be other Disney-esque creepypastas for pod mode, like Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, where you had to sort of have him shoot himself instead of directly damaging it because it just wouldn't work. And other ideas. Yeah, no, that idea was a bit toony, even if it would be a bit interesting. And then there was obviously the normal mode. Instead of having different Disney bosses, you would slowly see Mickey become Suicide Mouse and then get the COD mode reward, which I thought was interesting at the time, but it's a bit dubious with my current mindset, to be honest. But yeah, this wasn't much there when I added it to the game, to be honest.
Alright, fair enough. Alright, moving on to FE0, as in
Yes,
Frashaw27 0.
the good old years.
Why? Just
legally
why
distinct from
choose-
K0.
Why did you choose to remake it? Was it just I fucking hate K0, I can do better?
Yeah, no, it was just basically I fucking hate K0, I can do better. Like, that game had so much wasted potential in my opinion, simply because most of the characters just weren't really that engaging. I could go on a long diatribe about everything I think the game sucks at, but I think that might be a bit insulting for an interview.
How did you come up with the leveling system for HelpFresh?
Well, in K0, the idea is that each time you use Havoc Rush in battle, it'll slightly get stronger with each consecutive use. I found that idea and I wanted to sort of remix it, and so the idea I had was to mimic the boyfriend leveling skill system in FM2, except not penis, basically, not turning Tough Hat Slash into a 300 SP skill. And so I went to add the tree to add some sort of dynamic contrast between what you could choose and to make different runs of the game different. So you could have like one where you could spam it a bunch more, one where you do a bunch more damage. And obviously that didn't really work the best because everybody just sort of chose damage, which was kind of expected, but still a bit disappointing, if I'm going to be honest. Even if it was my fault.
Fair enough. How did you come up with the status infliction camera? Because that one is like a lot more unique than the double action one, you know? It feels more fresh in nature, if that makes sense.
Well, for one, when designing camos, I want each one to have a unique sort of gimmick to them, obviously. Except for the show stage one. That one's always a sort of just base cam, so you can get your foot in the door, so to speak. But one of the problems I had with making the base 3 cameras for FE0 was that, in truth, Threadbare and Spring Bonnie don't really have much, and especially at that point in the game, for really what they could do. They don't really have that many options, so the amount of things I could choose to do with them was really, really limited, at least from my perspective. And so, what I eventually chose to do with the status camera, it was because, well, for one, I was pseudo-inspired by the bathroom camera in CC, where it would basically just give advanced poison to you. But secondly, because I wanted something that could relate to the dynamic between Threadbare and Spring Bonnie, where like Spring Bonnie had to be a lot more proactive in curing people, or else they would both quickly be fucked up, basically. And I do think I succeeded in doing that, personally. But yeah, the idea was to have this camera that actually interacts with the character's skill sets instead of just being a generic meat shield, but oh no, now he has regen and now takes so much longer to kill.
Fair enough. If you could say anything to quirk about Casey, or what would it be? Since you kind of
only one thing.
I mean, you can say more if you want, but go off.
Okay. First off, how the fuck do you think thorns are bounds if when you made a patch specifically to nerf them, not even across the board because some bosses still have weakness to it, but if you deliberately nerf it and somehow the game's flow turns to absolute dog shit, how do you look at that and think, oh yeah, the thorns aren't that broken there? just looking at it confounds me because you don't normally if you're balancing you don't usually bring everything down to a mediocre level. But like god damn bro, the thorns were way too strong. The only fight where I didn't bam thorns on was the final boss. And that was only because I realized that he wouldn't attack every turn. Every other boss, I didn't even care. And that should tell you how broken these thorns are. And while my thorns aren't exactly the most balanced, I could at least attest that they did completely no fuck the entire gameplay from it. I would also like to say that Rick said that one the time. He basically said that his way of making skills is to basically play through the game with a couple of baseline skills that he's selected beforehand and make them up as he goes. And I don't think it really works, and it really shows here because all the characters have these most random ass useless skills that I don't know why. Like Flynn Bonnie did say a move where he recovers everyone's SP, but you get so late that it's basically worthless for you to use. And then Golden Freddy gets the same move, but heals more, and you get damage on top of it. It just confounds me because even if you're doing it like because of that, the characters don't really fit together. I mean, yes, they do kind of technically work together, but they fit together like trying to fit a triangle into a square hole, basically. It just doesn't really work, in my opinion. The characters don't really have that complexity or anything to really make them fit together. Even in FM1, you can see some dynamics with like Toy Bonnie stunning to help prep up other characters. Meanwhile, all the characters in this game are basically just lone wolves that relate to each other as well as a boomer relates to a middle school child. You just don't really have that much connection until the very last one, Springtrap, where he actually has this dynamic playstyle. But the problem is that you get him so late into the game that people might just drop it like I did originally before you get this more in-depth gameplay. And it's just not fun, to be honest. Also making a TP only character whose only source to get TPs through deliberately getting himself hit is interesting, but it doesn't really work in concept because it's trying to look for attacks like every turn just to be able to use your basic damaging moves, and that is just hell. That's another reason why Thorns is so prevalent. Nobody has any good damage skills. I mean, you guess you have connection, but that's a lot of setups in order to work properly. Meanwhile, for skills like Havoc Rush, you have to constantly be trying to farm up TP on him, which is kind of worse because even then, Thorns would still be prevalent because you still need to use Pain Magnet in order to get the TP to damage people off. And so, why wouldn't you use Thorns in that scenario? It just makes sense. And then finally, for a TP character, you gotta have some TP items in there, and yet the only ones they have is a 10 TP gumball that you get halfway through the game. It's just like the entire game is going against Fredbear at this point. I know he said that the plot was basically that Fredbear was pushing himself out of his comfort zone, but it really seemed like the world itself was kind of kicking Fredbear while he was down from how basically every aspect of it convoluted against him doing anything besides standing there and taking it. Also, the bank doesn't really have a purpose besides getting the dragon fishing rod. There's no reason you need that many tokens. I know you want to add a boss for the bank, but still, it just doesn't serve a purpose. Unlike fishing, which I could kind of see some purpose for in recycling, the bank doesn't. You can just grind up more tokens through normal battles instead of trying to do this weird bank fuckery.
Alright, thank you for that K0 rant. It was delightful. So now we'll ask you more like miscellaneous questions, something related to finale expansion now. Once more stuff related to you, alright?
Alright.
So, why did you stop working on finale expansion? Like, I asked Camel, but like, I want your side of the story.
I found some things lacking, so I wanted to do them myself because I know that Caleb wasn't going to do it, and then it spiraled from there. That's basically it. There was a bunch of small things I wanted to change, and it just sort of grew out from there. Partially because I was doing work that Kent found impressive, and so he wanted me to work on it.
Alright, fair enough.
That's it.
How has it been working with Kamek on finale expansion, and to some extent Ashley too, since he recently joined?
It's like watching a car crash, because what I always think the game needs is a complete and total rebalance to make characters more worth it, more aligning each other with both skill quality and ideas, and with constantly adding like 20, 30 characters every update. That sort of makes it like Sisyphus if the fucking angle of the hill increased a couple degrees every time he failed to go up the hill. And so my passion for the project has gradually diminished over time because while I do respect them adding more content, I do feel like at a certain point there is only so much you can do without making the game basically an absolute fucking wash in terms of difficulty and missing out on certain qualities. Like, every time I see the decimal in the SG recovery for dungeons. It genuinely makes me fucking pissed because it's such a simple fix. No, this isn't funny. This is such a simple fix, and yet Kamek refuses to add it every time, and it genuinely bothers me every time, and it never gets fixed. And that's a perfect example of why I've stopped really liking Finale expansion since I've worked on it.
Alright, yeah, that makes sense. Is there any like scrap content for Finale you and Kamek were working on? Just went, nah, fuck him.
I don't really know, to be honest. I don't think. Well, I haven't touched the game in a while, so I can't really attest to anything that Kamek might have done, but there isn't really much that I grasp per se. The only thing I would really say is the upgrade place where you could go upgrade the stats, but yeah, I don't really think Finale is really the type of game you scrap content for. Since you're basically just playing it there for random bullshit content at certain points. Yeah, I don't really think many things get scrapped, in my opinion.
Fair, right. The last, expensive question. Let's say Kamek retires one day, and he hands you Finale expansion. What would you do?
Well, the simple answer is to light it on fire and give it a Viking funeral. But the more serious answer is that I wouldn't really know what to do with it. The problem about it is that the game is so dense with content and characters and other bullshit that I can't really think of a way to start a process of even starting to fix it, to be honest. I mean, I could go down the list of characters, but that's still 100 different characters with a minimum of 6 skills each. And that's not even including characters like Golem Freddy and Springtrap who have multiple skills they can have at any point, which makes it even more extensive content. And that's including different eras and bullshit and balancing. And it's just I just can't do it because it's just so dense. Even if I was given full creative rights over Finale, I could still basically never truly fix it in my eyes, because it's just that dense that trying to really fix what I wanted it would be Sisyphus trying to push up his rock, but the entire hill is made of ice and has jagged edges all over it, so every step you take to push up the boulder, it also cuts up your feet and other euphemisms to make it sound more like hell. But yeah, I just wouldn't know what to do with Finale at that point, because it's just too much at this point for me to really handle.
Alright, fair enough. Now moving on to the more miscellaneous questions. Will you ever release the Chipper game?
Yes, for those who don't know, my first project, I think, was the SL Assist Location game I talked about a while ago, but after that, the project was a chipper game for one of Banter's game jams. And the game jam was focused around having unique characters for a story. And I ended up choosing Chipper because nobody had thought to use them at that point. And I still don't think anybody's chosen to use them even in the several years after the fact. And so the basic plot was that Chipper would one day wake up, decide he wants to go get treasure. He does some shit around town if he wants. He goes to go find that treasure, which, by the way, everything up to that point was working and functional, and then the files corrupted, so I lost it all, which was a bit sad, but you know, life goes on. I only cried for 5 weeks afterwards, but still, life goes on. But yeah, you get the treasure. The entire fucking town that he lived in burns down. But then you go into a place similar to the Amalaverse and Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, where you have these different points connected to the A7 location. Fredbear's No, wait, it wasn't the diner. It was the house where the nightmares were located. And finally, the Pizza Sim location, because I wanted to be quirky and have all the games with pools in them. And so he would basically do shit in there. You know, there's different eras. He would get the Paper Pals and the Crying Child from the A7 location, which, by the way, as we discussed in the previous version of this interview before everything was sent to the abyss of time, the Crying Child was supposed to be a sort of anagram to the Lost from the Binding of Isaac, which was certainly an idea I had at the time. He was also supposed to be the best damage dealer out of everyone, which was even a better idea of mine. And if you were to look through the files of the game, you would see that what I was smoking on that time was not the Giggle Bush. It was some sort of weird invasive species of plant that must have fucking poisoned my mind, because almost everything related to the character's skills were bad. Like, weird as shit. Anyways, besides from that tangent, from in the house location, you had Nightmare Mangle, and you also had the coffee pot from the Desolate Oak, which could heal people using his own HP, which was another idea that I had, which I do think still can work, but it's definitely still a bit dubious in that. And then finally you went to the Pizza Sim location, where you had the ability to get both Candy and Helpy, in which Helpy was supposed to be like this god that was the size of like an ant, and his entire joke was that he was super powerful, but also the fucking smallest being of all time. He had the ability to charge. I gave him a skill based on the 7 trumpets of the apocalypse from the Bible. No joke, I had this idea that he would be able to equip this trinket called a trumpet, and then he could use this skill where for the next 7 turns he would blow it, and another fucking apocalypse would come down. I can't remember all the effects, but I do remember one of them was like guaranteed poison, another one was like huge damage, the other one was like a swarm of fucking locusts. It was that insane. I really want to recreate it one day. Even if severely nerfed. I found that even today I find that idea so fucking funny. Just having this short little guy summon the fucking apocalypse. But yeah, close to that point, we had Nightmare BB trying to convince Chipper, and if he takes it, he turns to the Nightmare Chipper from Five Nights from Pike and Sons, you go up, and then you go up the middle tower towards Scott Coughlin because he was the one who decided to originally nuke your home in the beginning. And so you fight him, you win. I guess the crashes end there. I don't remember the rest. I do remember there was a couple of areas where it was like based on different games by Scott, like there was a bunch of mini sub areas you had to complete where it was like one was the Desolate Hope and other shit like that. But yeah, the game was a drug trip from start to finish. And I definitely do want to remake it one day, even if I couldn't authentically recreate the sort of drug trip I had during that time.
Got it. Well, I can't wait for that because it really sounds like a little drug trip.
Here's my oh god, it's my collection of Poker Night where you just add random bullshit and see what works.
So true. Alright, I got like 3 more questions, so alright.
5 minutes before you pass out.
Get the fuck out.
Fine, everyone. Fine, but this interview won't be completed.
Oh, wait, no.
Yeah.
So, why did you start learning Blender?
Well, for the most part, I really hate asking people for shit ever, and so that sort of resulted in me doing everything by myself in terms of game deving. And it certainly does have its upsides and downsides. But the reason why I started learning Blender specifically was that I wanted unique models for my game. Unique, just unique renders for my game and shit like that. And so I decided to start using Blender so I could accurately portray what I wanted from them instead of like vaguely photoshopping images that I already had and then having to credit those people that I stole the renders from, and it would just be a whole mess compared to just doing it myself. And it eventually did evolve into me doing renders for other people, you specifically, for a bunch of your games. Like, I remember I did a bunch of them for Golden Disaster, including the title screen, of which Drunk Fredbear is still the peakest one. I did one for FNaFb, and just a bunch of other shit. I'm glad I did start learning it because the amount of value I got out of it was a lot more than I could have ever expected. Because of things like the blown reversal title screen with glitch shots basically clicking the fuck out like Springtrap was in the Five Nights at Freddy's 3 one. I thought that was a really unique detail to add, and that's since the start of the game, in my opinion. And just other parts like that. I was really satisfied with my skills in it, and I do hope I can make more in the future.
Alright, fair enough. Do you have any advice for someone picking up Blender?
Well, for one, look at the bones specifically, because basically in Blender there is lines connected between each of the limbs and the joints and shit like that. Those are called the bones of the model. and you want to look for ones that are not colored white. Basically, we want racial segregation in this one. But yeah, you want them all white because if there's something like yellow, then basically that means it's kinetic, which means that if you move a different part of it, like the hand, the body will move with it naturally, which is a pain in the ass when trying to pose it normally because you're trying to like put the hand in front of the face and then the fucking elbows just pointing out in a different direction, shit like that. Yeah, I just recommend looking at those and trying to not have a bunch of them into the model. And then, obviously, there's lighting you want to. In my opinion, you want to have your models be relatively well lit because if you're making grungy ass models, unless it's like trying to keep them hidden or something, it just doesn't really pop out like you're in the battle, and more like there's some sort of fucked up background decoration, which is sort of the reason why I don't like Grayson's models because they're way too fucking dark for my liking, and so I suggest using lighting that, while it doesn't really fit in with the background, it does make them pop out of it, and it can seem more threatening. And finally, when choosing to model characters, always make sure to have the position and everything come across as threatening. If you just try to make the face come across the way you want it to, because obviously threatening when you want them to be threatening, jovial when you want them to not look like complete jackasses, things like that. Because if you're using some sort of generic model and you just sort of wiggle them around like some sort of jelly and soup, then you're not really getting much out of the model. And so what you need to do is to, well, just make them emote more, because if you're looking at a still image, you gotta make that fit look very noticeable, because nobody's going to notice a subtle eyelid twitch or something in a still image and shit like that. So yeah, just sort of over exaggerate your emotions like it's some sort of cartoon, because when you're looking at a still image, that's what you need to do instead of this subtle bullshit.
Alright, Fresh. Thank you. I'll probably use. No, I will use that advice. So I got value for free.
God damn it. There's so much $400 blender course to you now. What the fuck have I done?
Get scammed, idiot.
God damn it.
Don't worry, man. I'm sure you'll make a lot of money with the last question.
Oh
Being,
boy.
out of all the games you made, which one are you the most proud of?
For each game, I always try to improve with different aspects of each one, even with FE0 being of relatively poor quality comparison to its brothers. I still do feel some amount of pride in it because it does show me, because I did improve aspects like writing my own things, making a coherent game in a single month, things like that. But the ones I'm most proud of is obviously Golden Reversal and City Reclaim It, both for different reasons. Golden Reversal was, well, technically not different reasons, but the root of said reasons is completely different. I'm both proud of their story and gameplay. The Golden Reversal I'm proud of because it's the most FNaFb story I've really told, where it's not really trying to reinvent the wheel in terms of what game, what type of story I could create for it. It's just, oh yeah, it's FM3, but the acts are switched. And while it may be simple, I think I am proud of how much I took that concept and ran with it. Because, as you can tell, it's not a one-to-one recreation, except the fucking protagonist is now a yellow bear. It's like a completely different story, but it's with a different basis. I'm very proud of how I did that. And obviously, the gameplay is the best summon gameplay of all the FNaFb games that have come out ever, as many people can attest to. And so, I'm very proud I was able to make a system where you summon all these different creatures to be relatively equal, even if people don't really agree on which ones are the best and which ones are the most viable. God damn it, my dog barks. All of them are still technically worth it to somebody, and that makes me really proud of what I have done with the game and the skill system for Golden Reversal. On the flip side, Beauty Reclaimant is my proudest unique story because, well, for one, the premise is unique in that it sort of creates this dichotomy between VX Ace and NV games that I don't think really anyone has had the idea or stupidity to explore before, because most people just see them as different sprite sizes and poly sprites. But I decided to take that idea and make them separate, and I think it does sort of work as an explanation to why there's some differences in between FM and CC, which I definitely thought of at the time, but it wasn't like the main priority, if you get it. But yeah, I wanted to make this game where it was set. Well, for one, the idea of security came about because you had to make a deal character game for the Jam. And since this was during a time where I actually followed the Jam rules instead of making random bullshit that I thought was fun, I decided to use security because it was the most random character I could think of. And I used BB because it was the other most random character I could think of. And I decided to use Act 3D specifically because most people just use the normal BB, but I thought it could be interesting to explore this BB that has been downtrodden and being up by Freddy so many times that he just sort of gave up and is just now wandering the void as some sort of penance for his actions until security shows up and establishes that there is this unique difference between the two worlds, which I helped to explore. And obviously, later on, I developed the security character not only in your games but also in my head for the Reclaimant, so that even if I'm not currently working on the game, I'm still thinking of how to best utilize security as a character is what I'm really proud of in terms of that story, even if the basic concept for each of the eras is just FA bullshit of do X and then get out for the most part. Even if I do plan to expand upon it. The most proud thing about Shitty Reclaimant is obviously the two characters of the story, since I think they are easily the most unique aspect about that story in comparison to other games. And then for the gameplay, while it isn't really the most unique in terms of how you do it. I think it's, at least the version I have in my head, in Slasher 1, I haven't released for like 2-ish years at this point. I should really be on that, but yeah, the gameplay I have for SR is just this massive chunk of comboing off of BB insecurity, trying to utilize chips to supplement security into these different roles, and having BB learn all these skills gradually to make him the better party member of all his options. And meanwhile, security sort of accesses his foil in order to help him accomplish his goals. So if you have something like you want support BB, you have attacker security. You want status BB, you can have you have support security and shit like that. It just allows the system for skill chips really allows the two to really interact in special ways that I think haven't really been done before. While the closest I've seen was evidently Styles fuck up McDonald's, even if some of the skills were a bit tunnel depth and ideas, they were still the best implementation of two characters who bounce off each other, in my opinion. And so that's always what I want to replicate within City Reclaim It for myself, personally. And that's why I'm proud of the gameplay, even if it is the most basic and milquetoast of all of my games so far. Just having that dynamic between the characters is a lot more fun to me than a lot of people may realize. It's one of the reasons why I like my collection's Poker Night, is because of the amount of bullshit you can do with the character, that so many routes you can take if you decide to take them, that it makes the game fun for me to play through, even if each individual part isn't exactly the best.
Well, at least you have the remake to look forward to, or the overhaul.
Yep, the remake with the HUD I made.
Yep. Frasha, do you want to say anything to the viewers?
Make sure to send me all of your money, lay down all of your wares, and I will make sure not to steal all of your toenails in the middle of the night.
Okay, I get it, so you don't want to see anything, alright.
I mean, what can I really say at this point? Shitty Reclaim It, since Shitty Reclaim It's not exactly in the best spot right now because of college and other bullshit. And I could say that, but I feel like it's very ingenuous to put it in a random interview post instead of an actual post of my games built. So it's really like, what can I say?
Alright, fair enough. Thank you for taking your time out of your day for this, Fresh, and